Today I wanted to speak to you from a little bit different setting. I'm in the same room, as you can tell, but moved a little bit different position so that you could see a little wider picture. You see flowers behind. Tomorrow's Mother's Day, and that's a bouquet for Mindy and for our home for Mother's Day. This is a week of celebrating mothers, and between the middle of May and the middle of June, Mother and Father's Day, and it's time for family kinds of events, weddings happen and so forth. Very interesting. This has been an interesting week for us. As many of you know, that we have our daughter and son-in-law and their three daughters, Jubilee, Piper, and Georgia, live near us, and so we see them quite a bit. Georgia is a little over a year old. She turned a year in February, and she's just now decided that it's time for her to walk. And this week she took her first series of steps while at her home. So we got to see the first step or two, but then we saw outside 2 days ago her take several steps. And it was exciting and fun, and my daughter told me the next day that she even took three times more steps. It was interesting to watch her because you could see her calculating her balance as she got up and as she started taking steps. And it was it's not without struggle, but as soon as she would sit back down, she would get right back up to try it again. And and she's still just toddling, taking more and more steps, going further and further, but she still has to check her balance, and she still has to keep going, even though she knows she's going to fall. Now, why am I saying this? Well, we've just finished a series of interviews with Rick Weinecke, and one of the things Rick talked about, is just obstacles and just the fear of making mistakes with hearing the Lord speak to you. The idea that somehow we could hear and not hear correctly, or that we might hear something strange, or that we might miss hearing and believe it was some other voice. We just, and so as a result, oftentimes what we do is just stop trying to listen and go back to what we know is familiar. Well, my granddaughter is very interesting for Georgia because walking is still quite unfamiliar to her. Now, before that, though, she learned how to crawl first on her seat, on her bottom, so that she was scooting on the floor, and then she learned how to crawl on all fours, and then now she's moved on to standing up. So she's making the progress, and it won't be long before she'll be running places. She can't run yet, but she's already taking steps much further than she'd ever done, and 2 weeks ago it seemed like it was never going to happen. See, that's an illustration that shows you how there is a progress that you have to go through to be able to increase your capacity in what you're doing. And that's true as well for our connection with God and how we learn to converse and interact with Him. It's going to grow over time. And each time that we go through a transitional period of learning how to do new things in our connection with God, how to hear Him more clearly, or how to respond to Him more suitably, we're going to go through a period where we fall down, where we do make mistakes. In fact, this is a process designed for mistakes so that we can learn. If we had a mistake-free environment, none of us would ever learn, because none of us would ever try anything. It's only because we know that those mistakes can be overcome that we move on to bigger and better things. Now, the interesting thing about Georgia is my guess is she's just very soon going to forget that she ever crawled on her, scooted on her seat or crawled on her all fours as her way of getting down. But however, there is still the opportunity that when she falls too much and she can't get where she wants to go, she goes back to what was useful to her in the past. This is what I want to encourage you to do during this period of time. As you're trying to learn how to enter into a relationship with God different than what you've known in the past, I encourage you to keep trying that and not return to what's familiar to you. I received some emails from several of you that, like me, grew up in backgrounds that basically said that God doesn't speak, and that all of our interaction with God comes through really our interaction with the Bible. And of course, in that process, once we grew up and got skilled in the Bible, then we felt confident. But you see, interacting and conversing with God is completely different than all of that. And one of the things that we have to be aware of in a time like this, where we're learning to step into something new, is not only that we don't need to be afraid of making mistakes. Rick made that point. But we also realize we're going to make mistakes. We'll overcome those mistakes. But we realize we're not going to return to what we know. If you're still praying like you've always prayed, if you're still using the Bible like you've always used the Bible, if you're still going to church in the same way you've always gone to church, then you're stuck in familiar things that may have been useful at one time and even helpful at a time where you're moving into new things. But as you step into the new, those old things will no longer be useful anymore. But that'll be okay, because God will build something new with you that will allow you to go much further than you've been able to go up to this point. Just a few moments ago, I was out with George's oldest sister. George is a little over 1. Her oldest sister is Jubilee, and Jubilee is 7.5. And we have several bicycles at the house that the kids play on that are for different ages and sizes. And Juby's at the point where she wants to learn how to ride the bicycle without the special wheels that help the bike keep its balance. Riding a bike is a scary thing. I can remember when I had to learn as a kid and had to push myself to the point where I was willing to take the risk of falling over so that I could finally learn how to ride the bike. In fact, I can remember when I was a kid, I fell over so much in the street, I stopped. And then I decided I'm going to try riding across the grass, because grass was softer. Didn't matter, I still learned, and I went on. With Juby, she wanted the smaller bike, smaller than her size, because it felt like she was closer to the ground and able to balance better. But when you're riding a bike that's suitable for your size, it means your feet barely can touch the ground. And so that you're able to balance and don't rely on your feet to hold you up and to keep you going. So anyway, she's still trying to figure that thing out, and this is a time for us to figure it out. We're moving to, depending upon who we are, depending upon what God's done in our life and where we are today, each of us is moving to a different level. And you know what they say about riding a bike? It says once you learn how to ride a bike, you never forget. Okay? Here's what I want to encourage each of you is this. Once you learn how to interact with God in the kind of way that we've been describing, where it's constant, it's clear, it's you hear him, he hears you, you respond to him, he responds to you. An interactive relationship. Once you learn how to step in that, like riding a bike, it's something you'll never forget. It's something that will also carry you forward into places and into situations that are places you'd never imagine yourself to be. I know it's been that way for me, and I know it'll be that way for you as well. But this is a time, as we're preparing for Pentecost in a couple of weeks, this is a time to say to the Lord, Lord, help me ride that bike. Help me learn how to move with you. Hold me up, let me fall, let yourself fall. Okay? But know that your God will be there. He's prepared the way for you. And this is your time to learn how to ride.